will begin the 11th lecture on the book of Ecclesiastes. Our message today is from Ecclesiastes chapter 10. The title of the chapter is The Lazy Person. First, the wise man and the fool, verses 1 to 3. Second, the need to be calm with a foolish ruler, verses 4 to 7. Third, those who harm others will themselves be harmed, verses 8 and 9. Fourth, be wise in your words and actions, verses 10 to 15. Fifth, the land of disaster and the land of blessing, verses 16 and 17. Sixth, the lazy person's actions and the result of his actions, verses 18 and 19. Seventh, do not curse those with power, verse 20. The wise man and the fool, verses 1 to 3. Verse 1, let us read. Dead flies make the perfumer's ointment give off a stench, so a little folly outweighs wisdom and honor. The verse compares the wise man to the fool. Dead flies make the perfumer's ointment smell bad. If one small fly falls into the ointment, the entire thing smells and rots. Similarly, a little foolishness causes much damage. That is why 1 Corinthians chapter 5 verse 6 says, "Your boasting is not good. Do you not know that a little leaven leavens the whole lump? Even a little leaven decays very quickly. A little folly causes a stench, and it outweighs wisdom and honor." Do you know what students at school first learn from their friends? They learn people are slow to learn when we teach them good things, but they learn curse words very quickly. One bad word is damaging to other people and has a negative influence. Therefore, a little foolishness causes a bad smell. We must not tolerate the small amount of foolishness. The foolish person tolerates small sins. This person is made shameful and he gives off a stench. For this reason, we must not tolerate the smallest sins. The Bible tells us to rid ourselves of every form of evil. We must not keep any form of evil in our hearts, but we must rid ourselves of even the smallest evil. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 verse 22 says, "Abstain from every form of evil." We must throw away every form of evil. If we, it will entire body to decay. In this way, one small fly that falls into the perfumer's ointment causes the entire thing to go bad. Thus, we must fear even the smallest sin, and we must not fall into that sin. Small sin eventually gives off a bad smell, and the sin defeats wisdom and honor. A little leaven leavens the whole lump. 2 Corinthians chapter 5 verses 6 and 7. We must catch the small foxes that ruin the vineyard. We must not allow sin, not even the smallest ones. Song of Solomon chapter 2 verse 15 says, "Catch the foxes for us, the little foxes that spoil the vineyards, for our vineyards are in blossom." If the vines of the vineyard lose their flowers, they do not bear fruit. Here we have a cup of water that has a good fly fell into this cup of water. Then do we drink this water? No, we throw the water away. The fool allows small sins. However, the wise person fears the smallest sins. The wise person fears God and repents after committing a small sin. Verse 2. A wise man's heart inclines him to the right, but a fool's heart to the left. The wise man's heart inclines him to the right. The fool's heart inclines to the left. When it says inclines to the right, it means there is power. It also speaks of the importance of the right hand. It means there is strength in the right hand. Additionally, it means being active. Therefore, the wise man actively does the work of God. The wise man works hard to raid the kingdom of heaven. The works to things of the soul. He is able to claim heaven's inheritance. Matthew chapter 25 verses 14 to 30 is about the parable of talents. A master entrusted his talents to his servants. To one servant he gave 5 talents, to another 2 talents, and to yet another 1 talent. The ones who received 5 talents and 2 talents came before the master and reported that they doubled the number of talents. The master complimented them. However, the person who received 1 talent came to the master with 1 talent. The one who received 1 talent was evil and lazy, and he disobeyed his master. Because of this, he was rebuked. When we are actively doing our work, we will certainly gain. Because the fool did things half-heartedly, did not. The person whose heart inclines him to the right actively goes forward in wisdom. However, the fool is the half-hearted person who leans to the left. At all times, the fool does things half-heartedly. He says, I can't. He says, I cannot do this. Proverbs chapter 22, verse 13. When we act in faith, God allows all things to happen. Matthew chapter 11, verse 12 says that heaven is taken by the violent by force. We must not become half-hearted people. Verse 3. Even when the fool walks on the road, he lacks sense, and he says to everyone that he is a fool. The Bible again compares the fool to the wise man. Walking on the road, The fool reveals to everyone that he is a fool. The fool wants to hide foolishness, he cannot hide it. For example, the fool's words are flawed. Also, when he walks the road, the fool lacks wisdom, so he boasts to people about his foolishness. Have we been boasting of our foolishness as well? Boasting in foolishness is boasting in ourselves. We must lift up God and God alone. Boasting in ourselves is like boasting in our foolishness. 1 Corinthians chapter 15 verse 9 says, "For I am the least of the apostles, unworthy to be called an apostle, because I persecuted the church of God." The apostle Paul boasted in his weakness. 1 Corinthians chapter 15 verse 10 says, "But by the grace of God I am what I am, and his grace toward me was not in vain. On the contrary, I worked harder than any of them, though it was not I, but the grace of God that is with me." Paul did not boast in himself. He did not elevate himself. He only lifted up God. Therefore, whether we eat or drink, or in whatever we do, we must boast in God alone. The wise person boasts in this way. The wise person does not reveal his flaws. He only says what is appropriate. Proverbs chapter 25 verse 11 says, "A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in a setting of silver." The fool talks about himself and boasts in himself. We must only say words that give glory to God. We must not be faulty in our words. James chapter 3 verse 2. The wise person only says words that direct the glory of God. The fool talks a lot, but he becomes the fool whose words are faulty. Second, the need to be calm with a foolish ruler. Verses 4 to 7. Verse 4. If the anger of the ruler rises against you, do not leave your place, for calmness will lay great offenses to rest. The verse speaks about the foolish king. It teaches us how we can avoid being at a loss in the presence of a ruler. We must not allow the one in power to enrage us. We must make sure we are not harmed. In order to do this, we must not leave our place, but we must be calm. Although we may be angry about someone in power or someone above us, we must not be rebellious, but we must be calm and leave everything justly. Then we will avoid damage and we will prosper. Proverbs chapter 15 verse 1 says, "A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger." When we rebel against a ruler or superior, we take damage. First Peter chapter 2 verse 18 says, "Servants, be subject to your masters with all respect, not only to the good and gentle, but also to the unjust." Therefore, when we encounter the foolish king, we must be gentle in his presence. Beginning with verse 6, the foolish king's actions are recorded. What happens to the foolish ruler? Verse 6, folly is set in many high places, and the rich sit in a low place. The fool should sit in a low place. It is the rich who sits in the low place. The verse is referring to those without skill who are sitting at a high place. Slaves who have no skill gain power and ride around on horses as they are seated at a high place. Here, the foolish king is a king without skill. However, he is in a high position. The qualified and skilled should be sitting in the high place, but the unqualified person sits here. When an unqualified king rules a nation, nothing operates properly. This is evidence that God is punishing the nation. Isaiah chapter 3 verse 4 says, "And I will make boys their princes, and infants shall rule over them." During these times, the wise believer must be gentle as he lives the life of faith. Rebel or go against one in power, our faith will see damage. Here, the Bible teaches the wise believer the secret to not suffering loss when encountering a foolish king. Verse 7, "I have seen slaves on horses, and princes walking on the ground like slaves." Slaves ride horses, while princes walk on the ground like slaves. Fools gain authority and ride horses, while skilled people walk on the ground. Third, those who harm others will themselves be harmed. Verses 8 and 9. Verse 8, "He who digs a pit will fall into it, and a serpent will bite him who breaks through a wall." The verse says, the one who digs a pit will fall into it. Someone who digs another person will fall into his own pit. Proverbs chapter 26 verse 27 says, "Whoever digs a pit will fall into it, and a stone will come back on him who starts it rolling." If I dig a pit, I will fall into it. If I roll a stone, it will come back and hit me. Therefore, we must not dig pits. Psalm chapter 7 verse 14. We must not dig holes to hurt others. In Daniel chapter 6, there are high officials that are jealous of Daniel. Daniel was faithful in everything he did. However, those who envied Daniel requested to the king that he impose a law that forbids anyone from petitioning to anyone but the king. The king agreed to it, but Daniel continued praying to God. Enemies charged Daniel for disobeying the law. Daniel was thrown into the lion's den. By the power of God, Daniel came out alive. Instead, those who accused Daniel were thrown into the lion's den and eaten by the lions. The officials who tried to kill Daniel had dug a pit. In this way, those who dig pits fall into their own pits. The verse also says, "A serpent will bite him who breaks through a wall." In Korea in the past, snakes used to live under the rooftops. It is said that in Israel, snakes also live in walls. When people break down walls, they are sometimes bitten by serpents. Those who wrong others will be wronged themselves. Verse 9. He who quarries is, and he who splits logs is endangered by them. The one who quarries stones is hurt by them. The one who splits logs is endangered by them. The one who digs a pit brings harm to himself. Sometimes, when unearthing stones, the stones may crack as they are dug up. When cutting a tree, the tree may fall towards me. If we harm others, it will come back and harm us. Therefore, we must not dig a pit. We must also not handle situations with the sword. We must always do good. Good always wins. God is good, and He stands by those who are good. Therefore, we must have good hearts. Good defeats everything. Proverbs chapter 24 says, "Do not rejoice when your enemy falls, and let not your heart be glad when he stumbles, lest the Lord see it and be displeased, and turn away his anger from him." When others are facing difficult times, we must help them. Such is the way of an upright person of faith. We must not dig pits to kill others. We must not plot to cause others to stumble. Fourth, be wise in your words and actions. Verses 10 to 15. Verse 10. If the iron is blunt, and one does not sharpen the edge, he must use more strength, but wisdom helps one to succeed. We must be wise in our words and actions. By working hard and doing research, we can easily and effectively do our work. So, actions should be said and done with wisdom. In this verse, the Bible makes this comparison. The verse reads, "If the iron is blunt, and one does not sharpen the edge, he must use more strength. If a worker does not sharpen his sickle in his laziness, will he be able to reap the harvest with a rusty sickle? When the man prepares for the harvest by sharpening his tools, he can efficiently do his work. This is an example of acting in wisdom. Before starting anything, we must first be well prepared. Only then will we do a good job. Thus, we believers must be well prepared when doing the Lord's work. If we are ready, then the job will be done smoothly and we will become wise people. We must especially ourselves before doing the Lord's work, receiving His wisdom and power in prayer. This ends the 11th lecture on the book of Ecclesiastes. Thank you.